Hey friends, welcome to my channel Ryrori World. Today we will discuss on the topic of infection and its types. Before we start with the topic, let me give you an introduction about what is an infection. An infection is the invasion of tissues by the pathogens, their multiplication and the reaction of the host tissues to the infectious agent. So, an infectious disease is also known as transmissible disease or communicable disease, which results from an infection. Now, we will discuss on what is a disease. An interruption of a normal structure or function of any part of the body which is manifested by the characteristic set of symptoms which is known as a disease. An infection may be defined as the lodgement and multiplication of an infectious agent in the body. Now, let's discuss about the types of infection. Looking on the types of infection, there are various types of infection. The first thing is the primary infection, which is referred to as a first or initial infection which is caused by an infecting organism. The second thing is a secondary infection, which is when a body resistance of a patient is lowered by a pre-existing infectious disease, a new microorganism sets up an infection. Next, coming to the reinfection, which is a second infection which is caused by the same pathogen after recovery from or during the course of a primary infection. The next is the cross infection, which is an infection which is spread from one source to another, and a patient already suffering from a disease acquires a new infection from another person or a source. So, cross infection usually occurs in a closed communities. Next is a latent infection, which is an infection where some pathogens may remain in dormant from in host tissues but proliferate when host resistance is lowered, producing clinical disease. Inapparent, which is an infection which does not cause any detectable manifestation and which is also known as subclinical infection. Coming to the iatrogenic infection, which is defined as a physician induced infection resulting from a drug therapy or diagnostic procedure. Next is the terminal infection, which is an acute infection that occurs towards the end of any disease and is often the cause of the death. Next is the nosocomial infection, where it is a cross infection which occurs in a hospital. Here, the person acquires an infection as a result of being in the hospital. It generally develops 48 hours or later after admission. It can also lead to sepsis, or even in very rare cases, it can cause death. Now, coming about epidemiology of the infections, which is the study of spread of disease. First, it can be endemic, where the disease can be spread among a particular locality or area. And epidemic, where the infection can spread rapidly and which involve many persons at a particular area at a particular time. And pandemic, which can spread among the areas of the world within a short period of time. And sporadic, where the disease spreads at irregular intervals of time. Next is the stages of the evolution of an infection. So first is the incubation period, which refers the time between the exposure of the pathogenic organism and the appearance of the first symptoms. But the infecting organism may be causing substantial tissue damage, but there can be no clinical symptoms during this period. The next is the prodrome, where the appearance of non-specific symptoms and signs such as headache, fever, and lethargy can appear. This can also be referred to as subclinical stage. The next is the acute stage, where the pathogen will be able to overcome the host defenses multiplied in the tissues and also causing diseases. Examples of this can be pneumonia, meningitis, and diarrhea. The resolution can be the acute stage and it can be characterized by the gradual decrease in the severity of the symptoms. Next is the convalescence. Here the symptoms have largely disappeared but the body is still recovering from the disease. Next is a source, where it is a location from which the pathogen is immediately transmitted to the host or inanimate objects. Reservoir refers to the human beings, animals, plants, soil, or inanimate matter in which the infectious agent lives, multiplies, and primarily depends for its survival. Next is coming to the source of infection. It can be endogenous infection, where E. coli is the normal flora of the intestines causing the urinary tract infections, and the streptococci, where it is the normal flora of the mouth making the cause of infection for like the endocarditis. The second type of infection can be exogenous infections. So, coming to the exogenous infections, it can be from human cases or carriers, animals, insects, and environment. And in human cases and carriers, the infection may be due to some organisms which are acquired mainly or exclusively from the persons. Examples: AIDS, syphilis, pulmonary tuberculosis, whooping cough, etc. So, a carrier is a person who harbors the pathogenic microorganism without suffering from it and serves as a potential source of infection for others. So the two main source of types of carrier states can be temporary carrier and chronic carrier. The other types are the incubatory carrier, where the individual who is incubating the pathogen in large numbers, but it's still not the incubatory carrier, is not ill, is called the incubatory carrier. Next is the convalescent carrier who is recovering from the illness and is still secreting the organism is called convalescent carrier. And the healthy carrier is a person who harbors the pathogen but has never suffered from the disease. The elements in the carrier state are the presence of the disease agent, the absence of the recognizable symptoms and signs of disease, and the shedding of the disease agent in the secretions.